This next session, right, we're going to do two things. We're going to start off with a quick overview of where we have been, right? We've worked together over the past almost 2 years, and Penny's going to summarize a little bit about what we've been able to achieve. And then we're going to have a distinguished panel, and you can see the panelists up here. We're going to talk about where we need to go. So with that, let me introduce Penny, who actually needs no introduction to this group, right? She has been the energy behind RAI, right? She has made everything we have done possible. So please give her a big hand. All yours, Penny.
Perfect. Thank you. So we'll start with somewhat of a review from what we saw this morning. Both Provost Montoya and Manish gave a great overview previously, so I can kind of breeze through this. But I think these are the main 4 pillars that we have for the RAI. Research expertise. I'll talk about a lot of the things that we've been doing over the last year to build up research expertise. Building out our cyber infrastructure, both here at the University of Utah and broadly for the state of Utah. A lot of community engagement, anything from interfacing with museums or community groups, or really working with our special interest groups to broaden our reach beyond the University of Utah, and then setting up that services and support that we need in order to make this a long-lasting initiative with major impact. So we have these 3 thematic focus areas that have already been touched on. Our first one being environment, really focused on resilience. So how do we ensure that we can use AI to have environmental resilience looking forward? Health data operationalization, making sure that we can really catalyze our AI solutions using the data that we have from our medical center and really taking advantage of that strong strength that we have here in Utah. And then rethinking education, really knowing that as we move forward with education and with AI, we're going to need to re-strategize about how we're teaching our students and what we're teaching them. So with that, we've brought on our first round of faculty fellows. Some of you are in the audience, and you'll hear from almost all of these today. We have faculty fellows that have specialties in one of these areas or multiple. So you'll see that some of our fellows have expertise in both environment and teaching and learning, or environment and healthcare, or just one of these specific areas. And so we've been able to kind of move them around to target into each of these thematic areas. So later after this session, we'll have kind of 3 focus sessions on our thematic areas where you'll hear from our faculty fellows. So this is a program that accepts applications in October. So we're looking forward to seeing applications from many of you this year, and hopefully can onboard a new group in January. This is a lasting program, so this will continue to build over the next couple of years as we continue to bring on more fellows. We have postdoctoral fellows. As was mentioned earlier, we have 5. Unfortunately, only 3 of them are on site so far. We have 2 more that are starting in January and in November and then in January. But we are already seeing some really cool research coming out of our postdocs. So you'll also hear from them today. And then we mentioned these 4 distinguished visitors already as well. David Danks is a member of our external advisory board. He's also here today. Dietram was here earlier this month, I think, just a few weeks ago. And then we were able to bring in 2 additional visitors, Parisa and Diana, for the Institute on Humanities. So that was really fun. And so Rebecca Cummings, who will be on the next panel, was a major component in executing that and was able to help us help her by bringing in these really amazing researchers for that event. So as I mentioned, we've kind of highlighted some of these activities, but I think it's really important to make sure that you're all aware of these activities. We have an upcoming deadline on October 1 for almost all of these. So please, if you're not familiar with them, take a look, get familiar. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I can connect you with someone who knows, and it's probably me, but if it's not, I can make sure that we get you someone. But our Faculty Fellows program that provides a nice stipend for 3 years for faculty doing research around this area. It's not a specific project. It's really focused on the researcher themselves and the potential that we see for them. We have a distinguished visitors program. So if you have colleagues that are at another institution or at industry or government looking for a chance to kind of come into Utah and find new collaborations within the research space, that's a great program. Postdoctoral fellows, that's a 2-year program where we're funding and investing in the postdocs project. So it's a specific project proposed by the postdoctoral fellow, and then we match them with really diverse mentors to make sure that they have the mentorship that they need. We're embarking on cluster hires. We have 3 kind of clusters aligned with our thematic areas. We are just in process of posting our first 2 hires for our environmental focused cluster hire, and we'll soon be posting for our education focused cluster. So that's definitely moving along and something that we're focused on over the next several months. And a new program that's just launched is our seed grant program. So we will be funding seed grants for either research projects or activities that align with the mission of the 1U RAI. We will fund a total of $225,000 in projects every year, but are hoping kind of targeting more projects in the seed grant range. So very much kind of limited budgets to get you started. But that's a new program that's just launched today, I guess. And we will have our first deadline on January 15th. So you have plenty of time to kind of get started on that as well. A major effort has also been building out cyber infrastructure, and this has been largely focused so far on our CHPC, so our Center for High Performance Computing here at the University of Utah, as well as our ski infrastructure. We have made tremendous investments that have really, we're seeing 9x to 10x fold increases on some of these things. Lots of investments on storage, compute, networking, but we're really trying to set up the University of Utah and Utah more broadly to have the infrastructure that we need so folks can pursue the AI research they want. We've done, as I mentioned, some community outreach as well. We were able to see just tremendous wealth of expertise come from all of you in the community to come forward and help us set up these special interest groups and a community consortium. We've established 5 special interest groups focused on anything from policy to infrastructure to workforce development and community engagement. So we'll hear from each of our special interest groups this afternoon. One of the big things that we're excited to launch is this AI blueprint coming out of the workforce development and education special interest group. So stay tuned. That's a really exciting announcement. They'll be presenting more detail on that. But I think this is an open effort. So if you're interested in being more engaged, this is a great way to do so. Again, feel free to reach out if you're more interested. And with that, I'll turn it over to Manish to kind of talk about now where we're taking this foundation that we've built and where we're going forward.
Thank you, Penny, and thank you for all your energy and leadership of RAI, right? We're here because of a lot of your efforts. So I wanted to focus on some of the strategic things and then get started with our panel, right? So for example, one thing we did was to get together to the consortium that Penny mentioned to respond to an RFI that came out of the Office of Science and Technology Policy. So we built on what Margaret described as the Utah's AI innovation ecosystem, the regulatory frameworks, and we put a response on how you can do these kind of regulatory models as a model for the nation. And if you look at the AI action plan, right, you do this and other activities, Margaret's activities and leadership, it has been an integral part of the AI action plan that came out of the White House a few months back, right? And this one really built on the unique ecosystem we have that brings together public-private partnership, responsible innovation, and infrastructure, right? How do we bring them together so that we can collectively innovate and responsibly innovate in AI? The other thing, and Margaret mentioned this as well, is our partnership with NVIDIA, right? Where the state came together with all the universities in this partnership, and how do we educate and build a workforce around AI and the latest technologies underlying AI, right? And this has been a tremendous resource that we can use to really, again, help us lead in AI moving forward, making sure that everybody across the state can benefit from this technology. And finally, and this just happened earlier this week, is this partnership that built on all these things to be able to really create an infrastructure for AI, not just AI today, but AI looking forward, right? How do we create the resources needed for innovating in AI? So this is a partnership between HPE and NVIDIA, University of Utah, the Huntsman Foundation, and the state, putting together these resources over a 5-year period to create an AI infrastructure, but beyond that, an AI ecosystem with the services, with the different resources that are needed, with the expertise that are needed to be able to let the state. And these are resources that are going to be accessible across the state, right? And so this is going to be tremendous, again, to help us move in this direction, right? So looking back, right, a few years ago, ChatGPT and generative AI sort of caught us by surprise, and we have been reacting to it and making sure that we can lead, we can manage this technology, leverage its benefit, manage the risks, create framework, right? So, but it has been a reactive process, and we have made tremendous advances in this thing, right? So what we're trying to do, like any disruptive technology, right, when a disruptive innovation comes, and I'm quoting Clay Christensen here from Innovator's Dilemma, right? You have a change in behavior, in the way people use technology, but in the value structure. And with AI as a disruptive, as transformative technology, we are seeing these disruptions. We're changing how applications are evolving, how we do things evolving, what we value is evolving, right? So what I want to do in this panel is to sort of look ahead, right? And see how in 3-5 years we can get ahead of the puck, right? How do we try to envision what AI is going to look like and what we should be doing with AI moving forward, right? What is AI going to look like, right? Was a comment here that generative AI is one form of AI, but not the only form of AI, right? In a sense, it's this brute force approach to AI. You throw all the data to it and all the compute to it, and amazing things come out of it, right? But there are other ways to think about AI, right? What is the AI technology we should be preparing for, right? What is the hardware that's going to run like? There's so much innovation in AI silicon right now, right? So how do we think ahead about AI? Who is going to develop AI and who's going to use AI? What are these applications going to look like, right? What is the workforce going to look like? How do we do it? Public-private partnership. Is it academic silos? Is it only industry? Is it a partnership model? How are we going to evolve AI? And most importantly, how do you create a responsible AI with the right technology, with the right regulatory framework, right? And how do we think ahead about that? So we have a distinguished panelist, but before I go there, I wanted to sort of quote one of our fellow youths. He did his PhD and master's from the University of Utah, Alan Kay. He is responsible for object-oriented programming. He is responsible for the windowing system that we have on our laptops, right? He received the Turing Award for his efforts, right? And he said the best way to predict the future is to invent it. And that's what we do here in Utah, right? We invent the future. So with that, let me call our panelists, right? We have Jacob Andra. He's the CEO of Talbot West and the host of the Applied AI podcast. Please come on stage. Barclay Burns, who's the Chief AI Officer at the Utah Valley University. Thank you, Barclay. Please come on stage. Margaret Bussey, we just heard from her. Please come on stage. Rebecca Cummings, she is Digital Matters Director at the University of Utah Marriott Library. And Jefferson Moss, he's Executive Director of the Utah's Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, right? So we have a great panel. Yes, please give them a big hand. We have a great panel with very diverse perspectives. So what I'm going to ask them is from their different perspectives to think ahead, think 3-5 years ahead, and think about how AI is going to look like. How are we going to react to AI? How are we going to advance AI? How do we get ahead of the puck, right? And once they have their opening statements, we're going to open it up for conversation. So with that, let's start with you, Jacob.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me here. It's good to be on a panel with such distinguished guests. I love the work that RAI is doing here. As Manish said, my name is Jacob Andra. I'm the CEO of Talbot West. We are an AI native digital transformation company. What that means is we help companies adopt AI and related technologies, as well as paying attention to the human elements and all of the other data elements surrounding AI, but with an AI first focus. So we are sort of the translational aspect. I think Utah has an amazing AI ecosystem, and there's academics, there's the government policy part that Margaret talked about. We're in the trenches helping drive practical value with these technologies, and as has been pointed out, there are many different AI technologies, large language models being one. We help companies figure out how to apply the different technologies, sometimes together in ensemble approaches, figure out the right way to drive value. Also, as was mentioned, I host the Applied AI podcast. Just had Kevin Williams on the podcast. That was a great one. Check it out. And very open to any leaders in the Utah ecosystem doing interesting things with AI in an applied way. Reach out to me if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast.
Can everybody hear me? Is this on? Thank you, Manish and Penny. And it's been lovely working with Margaret and Jefferson for the last few years now on this whole project. Utah is it's a wonderful state in terms of people coming together and thinking and actually doing. We're a good thinking and doing state, and which I really appreciate. AI is just such an interesting thing, and I'm grateful for the question of thinking 3 to 5 years out. I can imagine a future where the world's technologies that grow and they're evolving and they're converging. So we're going to have AI and AI models. The nature of models are going to continue to change. Compute power is going to get a lot better, but you're going to see quantum start to become much more mainstream. You're going to see robotics emerging in some really robust ways, and things like digital biology. So I imagine a future in 5 years from now where Utah is at the heart of an ecosystem that has a path, not just with large language models, but understands the implications in terms of hardware, understands the implications in terms of a quantum future, and robotics and digital biology. And I think it's in the convergence of these things that Utah has a role to play. The other area that I think is going to become increasingly important is just understanding the behavior of these AI systems and these AI agents. The behavioral science, I think behavioral sciences now in the age of AI are going to be invigorated. Doesn't matter if you're in education, economics, neuroscience, the tool sets that people have developed over years of understanding humans are actually going to be turned to understanding the behavior of these AI agents and how AI agents interact with each other and how AI agents interact with humans. And I think there's a whole space for all of our disciplines to come together and shine a light on that. So I hope in 5 years from now, Utah is one of the places in the US and the world where we have something to say about AI behavior and how AI behaves and how it behaves with each other. And for me, the third thing, when we talk about responsible AI, sitting in a university with a lot of young humans, I think about this. And one of the young humans happens to be my son right now at UVU. And there's probably multiple parents right here with some child at UVU who's studying something. And at UVU, where I've been a professor as well, what is our responsibility, not just for the machines and do the machines behave ethically, but what is the ethical behavior of us as policy leaders, as industry leaders, as government leaders, as higher ed leaders, to make sure that our children have a world where they can still create, get jobs, and make a difference. And we have over 1 million plus workers in the workforce. I think it's 1.8 million in Utah. How are we as ethical stewards of this technology making sure they still have meaningful jobs and meaningful work? I think that's, for me, the biggest existential question is, how are we going to help in Utah have a thriving workforce of young people and people there already who actually feel like when they get up in the morning, they have meaningful work to do?
Thank you, Barclay. Margaret, you talked about your people-centric AI, right? building on that vision, how can we get ahead of the fun? How can we prepare and innovate for people-centric AI moving forward?
Well, actually, I think we have a competitive advantage in part because of this regulatory sandbox that I talked about that we have as part of our Office of AI Policy. But what's really interesting about it is right now that can only be used for state regulation. And you know what? Utah's actually pretty regulation friendly. Well, I should say business friendly. It's of lower regulation. But what some of you may have seen just in the last couple of days, there's a proposal out of Senator Cruz and the Senate Commerce Committee in Congress to create federal level AI sandboxes that will coordinate with state level sandboxes. Now, we had the first one. We stood it up quickly, which means that now companies that need to get state and federal, because that's usually what you need together, I think we have that competitive advantage. Now, this bill still has to be passed, but it was part of the AI action plan that came out of the Trump White House that Manish referred to. And so I think that's an incredible opportunity for us to be able to attract the innovative companies. And then they become part. We try to infuse that culture of pro-human, of pro-human agency and human interaction and all of those things that we think makes a good pro-human company. We can do that here in Utah.
Thank you. Go to you, Rebecca, right? So the human is a big part of the responsible AI ecosystem. How do you make sure that the human element is still part of this as we move forward?
Yeah, great question. And I will just take a second to introduce myself first. First of all, let me just say it is such a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I'm delighted to be part of this conversation. My name is Rebecca Cummings. I'm the Director of Digital Matters here at the University of Utah. We're housed in the Marriott Library, but we're a 5-college partnership between arts, humanities, social sciences, bringing the different disciplines together and really looking at research at the intersection of humanities, arts, social sciences, and technology. Probably one of the reasons that I'm here today is I had an NEH-funded summer institute that Penny referred to that was Humanities Perspectives in Artificial Intelligence. And we spent 2 weeks together looking at things like bias and training data, labor displacement, misinformation, basically the social and ethical implication of these technologies. And so I was delighted hearing Margaret's talk today, thinking about how do we build human-centered AI, especially starting right here in Utah, where we do have this long history of collaboration and innovation. And I'm sure we'll dig into that deeper as we go through these questions.
Thank you very much. Jefferson, you're leading the Economic Opportunity Office, and economic development is a big driver of AI. What do you see, what is your perspective on where we should be in 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me as well, Manish. I appreciate it. It's exciting when President Randall launched this initiative. I think we were all excited about the potential for this, and it's so exciting to see it coming to fruition. All of the different work groups you have, and I think it's indicative of what makes Utah such a great place for innovation. Bringing together people from these different experiences, different backgrounds, different expertises into the same room to having these really meaningful conversations is, I think, what is necessary as we look at the speed of innovation, the pace of innovation. And Margaret was very generous to me, but we would not be where we are as a state without her leadership. Barclay and I, we brought together some of the top industry people who are really kind of on the cutting edge of AI and the practitioner side that were developing businesses. We brought some of the best researchers together, which I think is a critical element, is having your incredible, brilliant researchers is part of that. And then policymakers who are willing to really challenge things and really try to drive new innovation. And Margaret really led the charge on that. So I'm really grateful for that. But when I think about the future, it's really not the AI itself, it's the AI application in different things. I get really excited about the potential in healthcare and life sciences. To me, some of the biggest problems in the world that have taken so much time to be able to dig through massive amounts of information and data are going to be able to move much quicker. And Orly's here, one of your professors who, in my other role, I help with Barclay as well, to run a fund that invests in helping commercialize research. There are some really cool things that are happening in the healthcare life sciences space that are going to solve some of these horrible diseases that we've experienced through that application. I also loved that the comment around some of the other issues. I think Mitzi mentioned this, dealing with air quality, transportation issues. I know Masood, who's here at the U, how do we use AI to better manage the grid? That's a critical element right now. And not just looking at, we need more power, yes, but how do we leverage the power we're using in the right way? And so to me, it's the application of AI that, and that's again the reason why we need to bring these groups together. I think true innovation happens when you bump, we call it bumpability, but when you get people from different backgrounds that bump into each other and have a conversation, and all of a sudden it creates a spark of, wait a second, if we bring those two together, this could change significantly and solve some big problem. The more we can create those positive, deliberate bumping into each other, I think that's where we're going to get more innovation.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to open it up for questions from the audience around what you have around the future of AI, how it's going to evolve. But while you're thinking about your question, let me ask the panelists to comment on, right? Clearly, AI is evolving quickly. And so we are trying to balance, how do we innovate in AI? How do you effectively use AI as it is today? And then how do we add the right protections and governance models around it, right? So how do we position ourselves to really navigate these three activities simultaneously, right? So that we are innovating and at the same time, we are using what we have in the most effective way.
I don't know if you want me, I can kick it off. I'd say on the policy side, that's why I'm so grateful that we have the Learning Lab and Zach Boyd and his team as well that are here, is that we're not waiting for the next legislative session. We're seeing things in real time. When we put the first bill together, we did put safeguards. We were the first state in the nation to do an AI policy, and we did put a number of protections in there. But we are learning new things every day. New things are coming online, and it's changing the world. And some of those things, we don't have time to wait for the next legislative session to be able to get in front of that. So I think what we're doing at the Learning Lab is going to be very critical. At the same time, we don't want to stifle innovation. I think what's happened in some other states that they've tried to do regulation is that they came in and took a broad approach to everything that they considered high risk. And those different things, completely different risks involved in that. And so again, I think that's why having a more targeted scalpel approach within those specific areas is the right way that we can still continue to encourage and support innovation, but making sure those things that are really high risk, we can go in and deal with.
Any thoughts on that?
So unsurprisingly, I'll speak to the more applied AI side of things. We've developed what we call our 5-year thesis, which essentially says AI is going to move toward being more modular, interoperable, kind of plug and play with a lot of diverse capabilities, including large language models, including other types of machine learning, other types of AI. And with this modular interoperable approach, we think that we will be approaching something we call organizational intelligence, which simply means in a business or government agency or any organization, you will approach this kind of integrated system of AI where you will be able to pull data across the organization, synthesize it, almost have like an organizational awareness of what's going on within the organization. And that this will create almost unimagined sorts of efficiencies and emergent capabilities. And so that's a future we're guiding our clients towards, starting to think modular, interoperable systems that can be built as individual components. You can swap out those components as technology matures. So we're trying to move away from the monolithic black box approach. This modular approach is more explainable, more human-friendly, and all of that.
Thank you.
The White House plan has two words that are really interested: trustworthy and evaluation. And I hope that in all, from researchers to practitioners, that we start building in trustworthy evaluation systems. I think it's really important not to just build things, but to have feedback mechanisms. And we can start to design that now. Like, how do we evaluate the effectiveness, the impact, the behavior of these systems. And it would be great to have some kind of from your group here in responsible AI, like what are some evaluation frameworks that people can use to look at what they're doing to bring about a sense of accountability. But it's not just accountability, it's about effectiveness. Are we getting where we wish to get with these things? Are we evaluating the outcomes in terms of in terms of healthcare, in terms of all these things? But I would love to see a framework that helps us evaluate what we're doing as we're doing it, so that we have a feedback mechanism that in 3 years, these things are actually better than they otherwise would have been.
I think that's a really important point. Right now, we don't have the right metrics or the mechanisms to be able to see how we're progressing. That's an excellent point. Any other thoughts?
Ming, I'll say a word about this, and I'm sort of shining a light and maybe underscoring something Margaret said, that often when we talk about AI 3 to 5 years away, it's really important to note we don't know yet what the future of AI is going to be. And what I love about what you talked about is that we get to decide what the future of AI is going to be. Of course, sometimes we're a little path dependent with the technology in front of us. There is no going back to a time where AI didn't exist. So there is that inevitability, but I don't think we have to be fatalistic about what that future looks like. I get really excited about thinking about different possible futures. It's like, do we want to have an AI future that is an extractive technology that erodes our privacy, that fracks our attention for profit? Or do we want to have an AI that does all the exciting possible things that we've done today? And then how do we incentivize that future to come into existence? How do we do the prizes and grants and private partner, private partnerships? Sorry, the PPP gets me. But I just, as we talk about the future, I want to just highlight the fact that we don't know yet, and it's up to us.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? We are inventing the future as we right now. But if you have the right framework, right guiding principles, right, we can make sure it's a responsible future. So thank you. And thank you, Margaret, for laying that out. Questions from the audience? Yes, please. Could you use the mic there?
Can you guys hear me? So Manish, thank you for hosting the session along with Penny and everyone. Honored to be a part of this group. Thanks to the panel members for opening themselves up for questions. My name is Sumit Parashar, same last name as Manish. I run a software company in Lehigh. We do a lot of data management, AI, and custom software development. Along those lines, we've also put together a data portal called utah-data.org. It's free and open source, and I would welcome everyone to actually check it out. So here's the question, is that talking about the next 3 to 5 years, the individual who started this disruption in Q4 of 2022 has just recently made a statement that the next CEO of OpenAI is going to be an AI. So we don't know what the repercussions or fallout of that would be, right? So this is a discussion starter, but I want everybody's opinion on how that statement impacts us, how that statement impacts the workforce, and how will we handle the influx of all the AI engineers from California to Utah.
I guess my first thought would just be, I didn't know that was what they were saying. I've heard things like teachers are no longer going to exist. There is always going to need to be a human element in working with people. And I think there's truth to the fact that in terms of functional, operational things, there's things that we can do. I'm not convinced that we're gonna give up, everything. Like I heard that teachers won't exist in 5 years. I still have the opinion that that's going to be a human-driven effort. I think what we're going to need to figure out is how do we ensure that we're including the human in that process. And I think that's what Margaret and the governor's really trying to push on is how do we not lose the human element. Yeah, it is an interesting concept though. And I know that we're going to have our first CEO of a $1 billion company. I keep hearing that with 0 employees, and that might actually happen. There's going to be a utilitarian thing around that. but to me, there's still that human element needs to make sure that's part of the discussion.
So I actually think that there are so many applications of AI that can fundamentally help humanity. We still have a lot of progress that needs to be made across our world, where the efficiencies that can be gained from AI are hugely beneficial, right? There's so much inequality if you think about, where we live, and obviously in these places in Africa and some of the other areas of the world that are really, really some of the lowest GDP per capita in the world. And I think that's where I personally believe that's where we should and where we can really focus the efforts to make things more efficient. I am not convinced as of yet that there is going to be no need for human workers. I just don't believe that, because there's going to be new types of jobs that are created from this. However, I do think we are in for a major disruption. And that's where policymakers and even policy partners and NGOs, that's where we need to be stepping in to figure out how we smooth that transition. I believe that very strongly. And that's some of the stuff that the governor is working on. We saw already, I talked very, very briefly about some of the initiatives already going on with our higher ed system, with our K-12 system. I saw Matt Winters here somewhere. There he is over here. He's been leading out on this with the K-12 systems. But we're doing a lot, but we need to do way more, I think. And I think that's where you'll see more activity there from the state to kind of manage. My personal opinion is political instability comes when people and are automated out of jobs, right? I mean, that's where, even if the net benefit is for everyone, there are jobs that feel like those are opportunities for them, that's when they get frustrated. That's when the disenfranchisement comes, and that's when frankly, political problems can come. And that's what I think we have to be watching for and solving for.
So I just want to add to that, right? So as Rebecca said, there can be many futures. And this is highlighting how things can go really bad is one future, right? But we get to define which future we want to really enact. And that's why having a responsible framework, having the values defined, make sure that we get the future that we hope to, that we'd like, rather than, and it's important to highlight these possibilities when things go wrong. And so I expect what to say, but I think we get to define together what that future is going to be.
I mean, I'll say a word to that too. I mean, the question was provocative in the way it was framed, and it was funny, and I appreciate that. But the question at hand is labor displacement. And I think that is something we should all be worried about. And that's something our policymakers need to be focused on now, not when it's happening, but now. And it's not a thing we're just looking to the future to figure out. I mean, we can look to the past and figure out when we've had automation, when we've had globalization, when people have been displaced from their jobs before. What did we do in the past that worked and didn't work? We can think about strengthening the social safety net, reskilling programs, UBI. I mean, I'm not saying these are all good ideas. Some of them have proven to work out and some haven't, but the fact we're not having more robust conversations now about what we're going to do if AI displaces 20% of our workforce, I think is very concerning.
Yeah, there are a lot of ethical issues around labor displacement. And then I'll speak to the practical side that was raised. I mean, there's a lot of hyperbole around this. And to me, Sam Altman's claim sounds very hyperbolic. There's a corollary claim that was brought up that soon you'll have $1 billion company run by one person. So I guess they would be the CEO. Then you imagine if AI can be the CEO, pretty soon you don't need people at all. It'll just be a CEO AI running a bunch of other AIs. That seems incredibly unrealistic to me, at least in the foreseeable future. And I'm in the trenches every day, literally applying AI and seeing where it fails, what it's good at. Now, it's the worst it's ever going to be. And all the people who want to poo-poo AI and say, like, look how bad it is, I don't really agree with them either. So it is going to displace a significant number of people. It is going to change almost everything. but it's not going to, in our lifetimes, or at least the foreseeable future, I'll say, completely replace humans. And in fact, it's going to augment them more than anything. The CEO role is one where human judgment, cross-disciplinary thinking, like the ability to synthesize information from a lot of different domains and make strategic calls. That's one where AI is uniquely unsuited, and where that's going to be one of the last things displaced.
Can I make one more point about that, Mishish? I just think, and I love all these comments, and I love the question too, because I think it's what is on everyone's mind. I think it's also, we've talked about choices for our future. Like, these are choices we can make. Do we want to cede some of these sort of ethical decision making, the leadership decision making to AI? I don't think we do. And so being able to figure out automating the stuff that we don't really like to do, that the computer is better at. I don't think an AI is better at making an ethical decision. I just do not. And so I think that's where some of these questions, as AI gets better, will come forward. And I think we'll still trust humans, frankly. We could cede it all to AI. And then what kind of world do we live in? Do we want that world? I don't think we do. So those are choices we get to make.
Thanks very much. Appreciate the panel here and the leadership by the University of Utah in putting it on. I think I have a bit of a more foundational question about what precedes before you can be responsible. And I should take a step back. I've spent my life investigating corporate and government crisis around the globe. Everything on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, or should be. And I'm seeing a lot of parallels to where we are right now for what I've done the last 30 years. And what I mean is, for the 200 odd clients that I've met around the globe since June 1st, to talk about AI, to talk about transformation, to talk about how you operate, talk about these principles, I discovered something which is quite alarming, which is most don't really even understand what AI is, how it works, what the risks are. So if you take that frame for a second and you think about that in the university context, the corporate context, the government context, and the home, I think that's the first thing we need to solve for before we can move to being responsible. So my question is, certainly programs like this are important. And you're right, AI itself is not going to be ethical, but there's a lot in the middle for everything everybody in this room is using and doesn't understand, that they and we do not control. You talked about Sam Altman and his views. Let's put him aside. But what we do know is that a month ago, there was a document leak from OpenAI that said they want to be the ministry of truth, which means they want to replace the internet, whether you believe that's the case or not. That's controlling information. Then at the same time, they want to control your decision-making on your computers. So I have a different perspective given the path that I've traveled, but I'm sitting here saying, what are we going to do as the state of Utah if we want to be the leader under President Trump's initiative and a leader taking nationally in the world? What are we going to do to solve for that basic fundamental fact? And I'm not talking about master's degrees. I'm not talking about PhDs. How do we equip the C-suite, business leaders, the board, students, the home to actually understand what this is, like you're explaining it to your grandma? Because that's really where we are if you want to achieve what you're talking about, in my opinion. So that's my question. I'd love to hear from any of the state leaders here or the fellow with the microphone at the end.
Thank you for going at it in terms of foundational. So I just want to step back into what is the core relationship in economics and law? It's the principal agent relationship. Every single law, so many laws ground this. How parents and children, that's a fiduciary legal principal agent. Teachers and students, doctors and patients, managers and shareholders. Described in law, they're economically viable relationships. And so when you're talking about this, that's where my mind goes. And you talk about principal agent relationships, what happens in these relationships is there's information and there's information asymmetry, and then decisions and decision rights, and those are governed, they're monitored. And so even though if these managers don't know what AI is doing, it's going to impact principal agent relationships that have legal frames around them, or in a hospital system or in an educational system. So I think we have to think about that. And I think we have to evaluate, to teach and evaluate the decision-making nature of AI and how it influences decision makers. I think how information is held and information asymmetry in these principal agent relationships is going to be central. So I'll just bring it back to things that we've been wrestling with for years in terms of economics and law, set a framework for this next generation of technologies. And I don't want us to lose sight of all the work we've already done and to say, oh, it's this new thing outside of all the work we've already done. It's bring it back in, say, what's the best principal agent relationships? What's the best shareholder manager relationships? What is the best parent child relationships? What does this mean? And then help equip the agents, the parents or the lawyers or the doctors or the managers to be aware of how to act ethically in this world where a machine now has decision-making capability.
I mean, I totally agree with that. This is not purely a technical problem. It isn't. It's the most transformative change, at least in our lifetimes, and probably for the future. And I think, at least just from my perspective, I think we're falling down as a state, a society, and the government is along the lines of what you just said. We don't need to throw out the common sense of yesterday that was applied to how we operate in a financial transaction, financial decision-driven world. Now that some of that's being taken over machine. But the question is, how do you bridge people with different disciplines that speak different languages? Lawyers speak differently than business folks, than technology folks. And even within technology, as evidenced by this educational seminar, we all speak different languages, right? So there has to be that bridging for that type of collaboration to happen. And I think a fundamental failing of what's going on, at least what I'm observing, is that communication's not happening effectively. And what happened is there's some big heavyweights that are trying to sell tokens. They're trying to sell cloud storage, and they're trying to educate society that this is the path. Use my algorithm, it's the best. Use my cloud, it's the best. But you've all said here, right? Algorithms are like people. If you want a mechanic to change your carburetor, you do that. God forbid you need a heart surgeon, you want to get a cardiologist. They're not interchangeable. So I give that simple example because there's this gap. And I think that from a state perspective and a university perspective, there's an opportunity here to educate people to have those conversations and to have a base level of knowledge. So thank you.
Thank you. Should we move to the next question?
Yeah, I'd like to there's a part of AI that processes data and all the things that go into it. But there's another part of AI that relies on hardware. And I know the University of Utah has worked on ray tracing that led to early success in companies like NVIDIA. I'm curious about what the future looks like there in terms of hardware and ethics and being responsible in that processing field. In addition to, it looks like some exciting opportunity with seed grants here to build on early opportunities in hardware to then catapult Utah into a very competitive place.
Okay. So clearly technology is going to evolve, continuously evolve. As I mentioned, hardware, AI accelerators are coming online, new technologies around data privacy and privacy protection, right? So there's a lot of technological advances, right? The question is, how do we leverage those as we develop the AI and then the AI applications of the future, right? How to create this? And part of that is creating a technological infrastructure that we talked about that has those capabilities so we can use them in our innovation moving forward, right? And part of what we're trying to do is to make sure we have those technologies here, accessible to everybody, students to learn about them, innovators to use them to build the next solutions, the next apps. And I think that's important.
And I'll just add on to that. And I've been really grateful for the University of Utah for being so heavily focused on innovation. They put an incredible amount of support and resources behind helping to drive new innovation. And SKI, your program that you work with, is doing amazing things. I also play a role in that in my other role where we actually help to commercialize a lot of this research. We have a $40 million state venture fund that's helping to bridge that early stage gap. Because one of the challenges often is There's great research that's developed, but it's getting it out into a commercially viable entity. And so the state has also invested dollars to help supporting getting it into the actual marketplace and providing some initial funding. But I know that President Randall and a lot of our presidents are seeing that higher education is going to play a different role. Yes, we're going to continue to train the great workforce that we train, but they're going to play a lot more active role in driving the economic activity of the state. And it's exciting to have a president like President Randall who sees the vision of that.
I think to Rebecca's point, it sounds like the future is in our hands.
Just a question in terms of engaging the status state level. By the way, my name is Valerio Bascucci. I'm in the Ski Institute, and I'm leading a consortium to build a data exchange to help people build medical devices. And so we're very focused on gathering high quality medical data that represent the US population. One major challenge we're facing now is that getting people to put the data in those exchanges is very hard because many hospitals are kind of scared to death to look like they're selling data of their patients and things like that. And for example, one challenge we just went through is that we contacted the cancer register at the state level. And at the end, the feedback was, we have all the data you need, but please go back to each hospital and ask them to share the data with you. Because as a cancer registry, our mission is to do only things for free and so on. And since this would be a consortium with like big players like Bayer, Google, Intel, they're kind of not too concerned to get involved directly. So I wonder what can be done at the state level to kind of cross those barriers. I know that many of those kind of regulations are done with the proper intent to make sure the privacy of the patients is protected, but not to the point that then nobody can build a good AI device because the data is untouchable and so on. And I don't know what's your perspective on that.
I mean, I have thought too, and I'm also curious to hear what Manish has to say. But again, like I hear this and it sounds like a technical problem, but it really kind of is a social one. Like, what are the carrots and sticks to get people to share their data? Is it mandates? Is it incentives? In a former life, I was a data librarian. And right at the time when NSF and NIH were saying to all of the researchers, Vinny here, whom at the U and elsewhere, you have to share your data. This is publicly funded data and it belongs to all of us. And it has been, I feel like, a 15-year journey of getting people to willingly share their data, especially the more hard fought, the more it gives you a competitive advantage, the harder it is to get them to part with their data. So it's usually some combination of incentives to get them to do so or mandates to require them to do so.
I would echo that, right? It's a socio-technical problem, right? There is the technical, right? How do you get the right solution? So I talked about creating enclaves which are protected, right? Having the right technology, privacy, enhancing technologies that can protect it. So how do you create an infrastructure that gives confidence in the data, right? And the second one is then creating an incentive model where people see the value in sharing the data, the collective value. And that's a harder problem. But I think with AI, with the promise of AI, people are seeing the value of collecting data, right? So we were part of the National AI Research Task Force, where we talked about AI, a data marketplace, right? An idea was, again, to build these incentive structures where people see the collective value to their models, understanding that sharing their data does not compromise privacy or security of that data, right? And so I think building on these things, we can get there. It's hard, but I think creating these infrastructure and piloting some of these incentive models is the right way, like you're doing, Valeria.
Yeah, but I think there's a huge policy component because, again, one potential advantage is that we could monetize the data and maybe ideally even the patients can get a benefit from that. But that kind of triggers kind of a knee-jerk reaction of, oh, there is money going around. And so then what do we do? Do we pressure too much certain communities and things like that? And by the way, Utah can have a huge role because a lot of the rural data is available here has a hugely high value because most of the data come from big city hospitals, and the data from here actually would really have a high value compared to the national average.
So we're having conversations. I was before I left the legislature around this, particularly with genomics. There's a lot of opportunities there. I will just say that was one of the biggest risks when we first started having these conversations, and Barkley can probably talk about this too, the synthetic side, and Margaret's over the consumer data privacy. One of the biggest concerns we heard from people was, I don't want my personal data just being leaked, my personal PII. And so we very quickly as a state, the governor very quickly said, do not put personal information into these models. Once you put it in there, it's gone forever. And so there was a lot of concern about that. We actually ran legislation when we were working on the working group around the AI. We actually did realize we have to have a data privacy protection. And so we actually created a separate working group that ended up doing another a bill the same year we did the AI policy that made sure that our agencies were protecting our citizens' data. When I am going and giving information to someone, it's a government, I want to know that they're only using it for the purpose and the use of the thing that they signed up to do, and that that's not going to then be used to make money for someone else or be shared. And so we did put some very good protections. Ironically, the reason for that is we wanted to be able to give the public the safety and security that your information will not be used except for the thing that you said it was, to then be able to say within that framework, how do we then move to the next level? And maybe Barkley's the expert on the synthetic side, but maybe there's other ways that we can develop a way to leverage that data in a way that's not personalized, but we can still get some of the benefit of the data that's there while protecting our citizens.
Few more questions.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Manish, for putting this on. It's a pretty informative session. Thank you for the rest of the panelists there. My name is Richard Sussman. I'm managing partner of Filter Fund based in Park City. We're an early stage venture capital company focused on responsible AI. I'm going to define responsible from my perspective, and I'm going to throw this back at the panel here. What you all define responsibility is in the world of AI. Responsibility for me is profit with purpose, that we actually invest in companies, they create jobs, they achieve successes, but the purpose is that they leave behind an element of improving society. I'll give you two examples. One, brain tumor analysis. It's one of my portfolio companies, determine brain tumors early. It helps obviously in the whole process and saves lives. That's purpose. Second purpose, putting guardrails around AI, making sure that, to your point, privacy is protected. But how? So that's responsibility for me. Building a company, creating jobs, leaning into technology innovation, but doing it in a way that has a lasting effect that doesn't displace us, number one, and doesn't put dollars before humanity, even though we're still capitalists. How do you define responsible technology in the age of AI?
I get to go. I'll take that one first. Yeah, there are a lot of different subcomponents of responsible AI. There's ethical concerns around displacement, around how AI interacts with humans, impacts their lives. There's data security and privacy. That's a major component. And explainability. And, this is very dependent on the use case, right? Certain use cases, explainability becomes highly important, meaning how does the AI arrive at its decisions? Can you trace that? And a lot of AI models today are a black box. You have no idea how they arrived at a decision, but you can build systems that are much more explainable. So that's a component of responsible AI. But again, not necessary for every use case. There are use cases where certain things like explainability aren't as important. So there are these different components and a lot of different ways to address it. So I think it's important to get into like the nuances. What use case are we talking about? What type of AI are we talking about? What are the sort of guardrails that apply to this specific use case of this specific AI? And just so much nuance around it all. And so whenever I talk to like business owners or stakeholders, it's all around trying to define the nuances of what are we trying to accomplish here? How are we trying to accomplish it? And what are the specific concerns we should be looking at for this exact use case?
Just building on that, right? I think as a technology, right? Understanding a framework when you're building the technology, thinking about not just the technology or the technical aspects, right? And saying, okay, how will it work? How do I engineer the solution? How do I make this algorithm go faster? How to scale it up, right? Thinking about also how is it going to be used? And what are the issues around the usage of that technology? What are the impacts of that, right? And then answering the question, not just how to build the technology, right? And how it's going to be used, but should I build it, right? And that's an important question to add in. So as we train the next generation to build this technology, how do we bring these aspects in it so they can think about not just the engineering and the scientific aspects of that, but also looking at the ethical aspects around it, and I'd be able to answer the question, should we build this technology, right? And so how do we equip students to think about that? And that's what I think about future of responsible technology development.
Just a follow-up quick question. I do a lot of work with Harvard Innovation Labs, the Stanford X, around this area. If we want Utah, and I live here, so I do, if we want Utah to be a beacon of innovation as we lean in as a state, I ask you to all think about in your institutions, what are we doing to make sure that we have a process and procedure in place that when we look at opportunities to invest in on behalf of the state or back in terms of research, where do they sit in terms of ethical and responsible technology? And actually have a procedure and a process to allow you to vet that effectively, because ultimately, being a venture capitalist, I'm telling you, dollars trump that most of the time. So thank you.
I'm happy to weigh into on the first and maybe, okay. So I was mulling over your question, how do you define responsible AI? So I'm going to address that one first. When I think of responsible AI, I think of technology that serves society. That if we were to project forward and think of the kind of culture and society and communities that we want to have, healthier, educated, safe, happy, deeply connected, how do we work backwards from those goals to build technology that helps us achieve our human goals? And so that's the way that I would think of what is responsible AI. We don't have to look very far back in history to see what an irresponsible, reckless deployment of AI looks like, and it is social media. We all know this. If we could go back in time 10 years ago and have some regulations and some guardrails, we could have built a technology that didn't make us lonelier, more disconnected, more misinformed, addicted to our devices. And so that's a great example of what we need to not do moving forward.
I would just say that one of the things really clearly about is how much of this can we regulate with the heavy hammer of government, and how much do we really just need to inculcate our culture? And I know that dollars may trump that, but not if we tolerate that. And so that's, I think, the much, much, much harder piece.
I think I've used up my tokens for my second trip to the microphone, so I won't take another trip. But my question is, the first time I heard about responsible AI, it was well before ChatGPT and kind of the social, everyone learning about it. It was a white paper written by Microsoft about responsible AI governance and ethics, and it was written by their chief scientist and their chief legal officer. So I think in private sector, the conversation about what should we build is being driven by computer scientists, and it's being driven by, to a large extent, the legal risk perspective. So for the university and the future of RAI, with the reduction in funding for humanities, I guess my question is, what emphasis, what priority are you putting on bringing to the table the philosophy department? It's obvious you have partnerships with healthcare and with environmental science, but what is your priority and what is your approach for bringing to the table the philosophy department, researchers, the sociology department? And do you see this as a part of the One URA cross-discipline team?
I'll take a first cut at it, and I'm sure you have. But no, it's very important, and it's been integral to our activities so far, right? We work very closely with the School of Social and Behavioral Science, with humanities, with the social work, right? All across the university to make sure we have this perspective. We have the technical perspective, we have the application perspective, but we have the social perspective as well, as the ethical perspective. And how do we bring them together as we advance? And more importantly, how we bring together when we talk to our students about this, right? Because they will have to grapple with some of these challenges as they get into the workforce. And they have to be equipped to think across these dimensions. And I think that's sort of how we designed this program from the scratch.
And I do have to commend RAI. I feel like we've been part of conversations since the very beginning and as a connection between those two sides of campus. But I'll also just respond to your question saying, I really do think this is the humanities' time to shine. And I know that's not always reflected in funding or different things, but no one has asked this yet, but like, what are the skills that we're going to need moving forward right now? We need critical thinking. We need to be able to ask the right questions and evaluate the responses. We need to be able to curate the best of when AI spits out different, things. We need aesthetics and subjectivity. Someone had said, is it going to be the AI CEO? No, it's not going to be the people making human judgments and human values. I actually worry a little bit about coders. We're probably not going to need as many of those as we did in the past because AI can do a lot of that entry-level basic coding. And as long as the thing works, none of us really care if a human coded it or if AI coded it, as opposed to things like literature and art and aesthetics, where we actually care that a human was behind it, talking about our own human values and human experience. So I will just say that as a pitch of, I sincerely hope we are not defunding the humanities. And to Margaret's point of what do we do to build this future, I think training our K through 12 students and our higher education students in the humanities as they develop this technology is absolutely essential to the development of responsible AI.
Great.
So kind of related to that, oh, sorry, you want?
Oh, no, go ahead.
My question is kind of about what we should use AI for. So for labor replacement and stuff, I think you covered a bunch of good solutions, but for specifically creative pursuits, and I'm thinking about writing research papers, and coding. I hear more and more people are relying on ChatGPT to write for them. And there's a point at which I'm imagining that we will produce data and we could just release that data and then have LLMs interpret and synthesize that data and present it, to other people. And that bothers me because I'd like to write. But I honestly don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. So I kind of wanted to know what you think about that, and also about, in general, to what degree should we allow LLMs to take over these creative pursuits?
Yeah, I can take that one. Yeah, and I'll broaden it beyond even large language models to broader picture of AI and its impact on a lot of different vocations. So there's an important distinction here to make. AI is a discipline in its own right, just like language or, electricity are fields in their own right, but it's also a layer that is going to overlay every single discipline in existence and change the way that they're done. And so when we talk about AI, we can talk about it as its own discipline or as the impact it's going to have on literally everything. And so we need to understand that. And I think the most important point to make about the way it's going to impact all the disciplines is, let me circle back to this idea of brain atrophy. So there's a lot of studies coming out now that say if you just rely on ChatGPT or large language models, parts of your brain literally start to atrophy and you become less smart. And that's actually a concern. But I would say that's why we need human ingenuity more than ever. We need the sorts of disciplines that the humanities teach, critical thinking skills. Am I asking the AI the right questions? Do I agree with what it's saying? Should I shift the angle, right? All of these things that the critical humanities skills teach us. I'm a humanities student of the U myself, a graduate of the U with a humanities degree. So I do agree with Rebecca in that regard. But really, it's about people in all the different disciplines learning what they are uniquely bringing to the table that AI cannot replace, then letting AI do the part that it does extremely well and figuring out the right way to interact with AI in that discipline. Those will be the people across every different discipline that rise to the top.
We're running out of time. We'll take one more question. And
Thank
then
you.
while that we are responding, I'd like the panelists to sort of look into the crystal balls and say we're meeting here in 5 years. What would success look like? What would convince you that we did do things responsibly? Bay.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Wang Phillips. I'm a faculty at the Ski Institute. I also teach ethics in computing to our undergrad here. So I'm so glad to see Utah as a state is at the forefront of regulations about generative AI, starting from the most recent one, mental health care chatbots. So my question is, from the state level, where do you see as how the legislation is moving in regulating in general all the other generative AI technologies? And where do you see the future is for this type of regulations? And also this is also a question for all the panelists over how do we actually put guardrails over generative AI to benefit society, but how to actually do it in a very efficient way.
Because I know we're time limited. I'll just say quickly, I mean, you chatbots. Again, we're looking at companion AIs now. This is exactly what the office is designed to do, to look around to see where you're seeing potential or particular harm and to put in guardrails. I think we've come up with some really creative ways to do it under the leadership of, again, then Representative Jeff Moss when he was in the legislature passing that bill. And so I actually think we have the great model to be able to respond as a peer quickly, not 10 years down the line with what happened with social media. So I feel good about Utah's approach. But again, as I mentioned earlier, I think we must get something at the federal level on data privacy, data ownership, how do we get the benefits of our data being used and monetized? How do we give permission? How do we own our data? That is the currency of AI is our data, right? And right now we do not have a model for that. So I think that's the number one thing that has to happen. We can try to do it in Utah. We already have a consumer data privacy law. We're going to work to do a different one, but it has to be at the national level ultimately.
And I'll just quick on this as well. I think that Utah provides a unique situation where we have stability. I mean, we actually have a government that's gets along. We're not constantly blowing each other up, and that we provided some structure. And for a lot of these companies, that's what they need because they're in states where they don't have anything and they don't know what's going to hit them. And so I think Utah has a unique opportunity. And the way we've tried to do this is to not just put the hard do not do's. We know there's a lot of things we can't regulate if they're not in our state, but providing these safe harbors, if they do the right things, like what we did with mental health, we said, here are the things that are the best practices that are good to do. If you do those, we'll provide you some exemptions if there's things that go wrong. And that's what Margaret and her team has done. And I think that's what companies are going to look for. I think where Utah can continue to lead is creating the right environment where companies want to be here for the stability, at the same time saying, this is what we expect you to do, not with a heavy hammer, but we're going to give you protection if there's things that we struggle with. So that's I think where Utah can continue to lead out.
Okay, with that, 10 seconds, right? Start with you, Barkley. 5 years from now, what would we think we did it
Can I have 20 seconds?
20
Okay.
seconds.
All right. So Utah's embarking on what is called state endorsed digital identity. And so it's when you're born into a county or state, the state gives you a birth certificate. And so there's this hope. I hope that in 5 years from now, human beings led out by Utah have a digital identity that they own and not Google. And that they can then have control over their digital identity in the same way that they have control over their human identity. And I think that's going to be foundational to anything that actually emerges out of where we go with this.
I actually totally agree with Barclay. Yeah, who's clapping? I totally agree with that. And I would just double down on my data privacy, data ownership comment I just made.
And I'll just add in what Margaret and I are working on with the governor, really the governor's initiative around the human-centered approach to AI. He feels very strongly, we don't want to have the same thing happen with social media. We need to lead out on making sure that we're providing the right direction. Utah was one of the first in terms of going after some of the harms of social media. I think Utah wants to make sure that we're proactively preventing those things from happening?
So I see a future of more modular interoperable capabilities similar to what Lucidity is doing with specialized machine learning. Instead of a couple monolithic companies dominating everything we have, like Lego sets, you can literally build what you want with all these players coming up in the ecosystem, creating unique, individualized capabilities that you can customize, put them together to do whatever it is you want to do.
And in my 10 to 20 seconds, I hope in 3 to 5 years, we are really leaning into collaboration and having more voices in the room. We need to have policymakers. Need to have attorneys. We need to have humanists. We need to have technologists. And I also think we need more community engagement. We talk about it. We pay lip service to it. But when we're talking about AI and education, we need lots of teachers in the room to talk about how that's going to work. When we talk about criminal justice, we need to have police officers and marginalized communities in the room. When we talk about healthcare, we need nurses and doctors in the room. So I will go with collaboration and community engagement.
Perfect. We have our marching orders. Let's get together and make this happen. Please join me in thanking the panel.